Hi, friends, and welcome to Becoming LawyHer, the podcast. I'm your host, Hadiyah Cummings, a first-gen law grad, a civil rights lawyer, and the founder of LawyHer. However, if you know me from Instagram or TikTok, you probably also know me as a gal who loves to yap about what the legal profession is actually like. This episode is called Becoming the Main Character, and I chose that for a reason, because we are getting personal. Before we dive into the strategies and the interviews and the expert level advice, I wanted to first tell you my story. In this episode, I hope to share with you guys the strategy that I used when I was applying to law school and didn't even realize it. But before we get there, a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Arkansas with a family like many others that is deeply rooted and connected to the mass incarceration system in America. My father was incarcerated. Many of my male cousins were incarcerated. Most of my uncles were incarcerated. And so I knew intimately growing up what the criminal legal system was and how it affected families like mine. But candidly, I didn't think I always wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, when I was little, I had this dream of being a fashion magazine editor. And then, like many folks, was radicalized by the murder of Trayvon Martin. And I thought, okay, maybe I will be a reporter, right? I want to report on these issues that happen in my community. However, I got to Howard University, shout out HU, and really everything changed for me. I started to question things I had never questioned before. I started to think about what is justice? Is there a justice? And really think about the systems that operate within America and how I could see myself intertwining and being involved in this legacy of justice fighting that I had been inspired by so many civil rights leaders who came before me. And so when I realized law was my path, I was 100% committed to it. So there's one thing you need to know about me. I am someone who my whole life, I have just been, some might say overly ambitious, I might say just enough. And another thing I should say is that I have always lived by the motto that you might think you have more resources than me, you might have more money than me, but you can never say that you outworked me. And so with that thought process in mind and knowing how competitive law school admissions was, I interned every single semester that I was in college, including my freshman year and including every summer. Now, don't get me wrong here. I was not interning at legal offices every single semester. I know the struggles of finding those internships. Instead, my priorities were one, getting paid, and two, getting experience about issue areas that I found interesting. So there was a summer that I was interning at this policy focused place. They were working on Indian nuclear weapons. There was another time, maybe a couple of times actually, that I interned on Capitol Hill. I also worked as an investigative intern at the Public Defender Service of DC, which I thought there during that experience, it confirmed that I wanted to be a lawyer and more specifically a public defender. However, maybe in a later episode, we'll get to why I will never be a public defender. In any case, though, all those experiences were instrumental to me in my understanding of how I saw myself entering the legal space. And also, I think, were another part of my application that made it compelling, considering that I applied to law school at 21 years old. I think I may be 21 years old and graduated a semester early from college. And so I applied from law school straight through. And so I knew that, I'm not going to have this professional experience that maybe some older applicants were going to have. But also, candidly, in the back of my mind, I was thinking about my own test taking abilities. I have never been a strong standardized test taker. And so when I decided I wanted to go to law school, again, going back to being super ambitious, I immediately was like on the internet looking at what is a median? What does law school admissions look like? An organization on my campus called Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity routinely did webinars about how to go to law school. And so that's when I learned about you got to prepare, you got to spend all this money, you have to do all these things. And in my head, I was like, oh, well, I don't know how great that's going to work out for me. And so my ambition was, okay, I'm going to try my best with this LSAT, but every other part of the application is going to be as best as possible. So I graduated undergrad with a I did all of those externships. I started an organization back home, though that wasn't necessarily like me being strategic. It just was like a passion meets purpose moment. Still, though, I share that because I think it's important for you guys to get the full context and view of who I was as an applicant. As I said, we had the internships, we had the super high 4.0 GPA, but we also ended up with a 163 LSAT score, which depending on the rooms I say that in, I will get different reactions, right? And it's part of the reason why I don't really talk about it online, because as you guys will see throughout the season, there's so much more that goes to your application than just your LSAT score, and people fixate on that. And so I know some of you guys are probably hearing that and you're like, oh my God, that's so great. You did amazing. I wish I could get that score. And other people are like, what made you think you could get into these schools? Like there's a wide spectrum in how people view the LSAT, and I can't wait to talk more about my thoughts and theories, but that is the gist, that's the background of Hadiyah, the applicant. Now, you can think whatever you want to think about my LSAT score, but the point of me sharing this is that I know for a 100 fact that it was not my LSAT score that got me into almost all of the top law schools. Rather, it was my application as a whole. And I know that to be true because when I got accepted into Yale Law School, I applied in November. I heard back like December 21st, literally almost 6 weeks after I had applied. One of the admissions officers gave me a call after I initially got accepted, and they let me know that one of the reasons why they were so impressed by my application and wanted to send out my acceptance as soon as possible is because they could see from every single part of my application materials that were submitted why I wanted to go to law school and how I would contribute to their community, and they saw potential in me from those application materials. And it was in that moment that I realized that what I had thought in my head was like, oh, I just need to overcompensate and do the best, tell my story. I don't want them to have any doubts that I need to be at their school despite the score that they can see. Don't think about that score, think about all these other great things. That was my mindset. Hearing that feedback made me realize that no, this is a real strategy. This is actually something that if I had paid thousands of dollars for an admissions expert to tell me, that's probably how they would have told me to approach law school admission. And so from that moment, I got accepted, and in true fashion during the times, or I guess formerly known as Twitter, now X ? I shared that on that little app, and the tweet went viral. I'm talking 8 million impressions. Law schools that I had applied to saw the tweet and retweeted it. Mind you, this was a tweet saying, oh my God, I got accepted into Yale Law School. I'm going to be the first lawyer in my family. My mind not thinking I still have other apps out here. Yale was one of the first schools that I applied to. So I essentially told all these other schools I wasn't going there. That's neither here nor there. This is to say that the tweet reached a lot of people. And so I had hundreds of folks reaching out to me asking, how did I do it? What were my stats? What advice do I have? And as a first-gen student who navigated that process by myself, I felt compelled to respond to every single person because I was like, let me put y'all on game. This is what I did. This is how I did it. And eventually I realized that maybe it wasn't the most effective thing operating via DMs. And so I decided to create a blog on Instagram, which was called Lawyer Bay Loading. If you were an OG follower of Lawyer Bay Loading, I would love for you to let me know in the comments so we can reconnect. But I started that page just to recap my admission cycle. I shared all the details from my personal statement, from who I got letters of recommendations from and why I asked those people. I talked about my LSAT score, my LSAT strategy, literally told everything. And then when I got to law school, I used that as a place to tell my journey. And eventually at some point, my niece convinced me to get on TikTok, and really the rest is history. So how did we get here at LawyHer, becoming LawyHer? Eventually, at some point, maybe in my second year of law school, I realized that me holding weekly office hours, coordinating personal statement reviews from people and lawyers and law students in my community for 50 plus people, responding to DMs night and day, editing people's personal statements on the side. I realized all of that maybe wasn't a little hobby anymore. Maybe that wasn't something I could call oh, I have a little Instagram page. That's how I was describing it in my big law summer associate interviews when they're like, oh, what do you do for fun? I was talking about this full-time job that I was essentially doing. And so I had the idea in law school that I wanted to formalize the community, my passion for helping folks enter this profession. And also too, in law school, I was motivated by the fact that I had gotten to this Ivy League school and entered all of these spaces. And still I felt a little bit of other in that even when I would see women of color, Black women in the space, I didn't see them showing up in ways that I identified with, right? I felt like a lot of folks were kind of cosplaying a version of themselves to meet the standards of what the legal profession expects, right? Like not too loud, very muted, very, I guess I don't know if we're still using the word demure, but like that is really how people operate in the legal profession for good reason, right? The legal profession is incredibly elitist, and it's not a place that's always been friendly to women and people of color. I know we see a lot of each other now, but that is a change that's been in the past 10 years. And so when I was in law school and I wore my little cute little outfits to class or to networking events, or when I would, bring up my cultural references that were important to me, I realized that just people weren't really showing up as their authentic self, and it bothered me. In large part because people felt like I needed to tone down who I was or be a different version of who I was to be successful or to get this clerkship or to get this job. And I wasn't interested in doing that. I simply, as a Howard University grad, I simply was not interested in changing who I was for a job, right? Like I am a full person outside of it. And in fact, I think it's my identity. It is those experiences. It is those quirks. It is my style that makes me even a better lawyer who's able to connect with her clients. And so because I didn't see people talking about that, I also started posting about that on TikTok. And that is where the dream of LawyHer came from. Both me realizing that folks in our community need tangible resources, people who have been in their seats and have gone what they have gone through to provide them with resources to have a seat at the table. But they also need someone who has the privilege of a fancy degree and the respect of people in her community to also stand up to the legal profession and say, hey, y'all gotta change. You have to make room for people to show up as their full selves, which is the mission of LawyHer and is the hope that you will leave this podcast feeling at the end of this season and the seasons to come, knowing that not only that you deserve to be in this profession, you deserve to show up as your full self. So what does this mean for you, the viewer, the audience, listener? Well, let me give you a little recap of what's to come in at least the first 3 seasons. So in this first season, I will essentially be doing a masterclass with my guests who are all either experts in the field or are deans of admissions at law schools across the country. Together, we will be giving a masterclass in a signature LawyHer strategy approach when applying to law school, which we call becoming and being the main character of your law school application. A little bit more about that to come. And in the second season, which I am super excited about, I will actually be taking calls and notes from you guys, the audience who are applying to law school during this 25 through 2026 admission cycles to help you form and figure out your narrative. So if you've ever struggled figuring out, how do you articulate a transition from perhaps pursuing a PhD to now wanting to be a lawyer, or if you have a tricky character and fitness issue that you didn't know how to explain or to write about, or maybe you've had a very straightforward path to law school, but you're having trouble trying to figure out what is that through line that really pulls together a compelling story, a theme. You can write into us during the second season. Don't worry, we will give you announcements about when you can write in, and I will invite you to talk a little bit about your story, and you will get a live one-on-one coaching session with me to help you figure out what is your narrative. And then finally, and in the third season, and perhaps many of the other seasons to come, we will do interviews with lawyers that I admire in my community. At the heart of Becoming LawyHer, when I imagined what this podcast would look like, it was telling people's journeys and their stories. I think more people need to know that you don't have to be this buttoned up person like maybe you could describe myself as, right? Like super ambitious, high GPA in college, did all the internships, applied to it and was successful at law school. That's one path that I had. However, you don't have to be like that. And in fact, many people aren't. What I love so much about being in the space is meeting those women every single day. So meeting women who are second or third year law students and also bottle girls in DC, or meeting women who are mothers to 2 little babies who, are starting pre-K and middle school, and also somehow they still have time to be on law review and to intern and to do all of these other activities. There are so many paths and journeys to becoming a lawyer, and my hope and goal with that last season and all the seasons to come after that is to show you that so you can see yourself, because at the end of the day, sometimes you really just got to see it to believe. Now, I would give you a little preview about our strategy, our signature strategy that we coach our clients on, that we are hoping to impart onto you through each episode. So each episode this season, we'll talk about a different part of the law school application process and components with different people. But all through those episodes, you will probably see an underlying theme. And that theme is that you should be the main character of your law school application. What does that mean, Hadiyah? Being the main character in your law school application means thinking about your application as if it is a novel, right? Obviously, it's not fictitious. In this novel, though, you are the main character in it. And for the chapters of this novel is each part of the law school application process. So your personal statement, your resume, your letters of recommendation, your optional essays, possibly even an addendum, what your letters of recommenders have to say about you. All of those pieces are parts of your story. They're chapters that help tell who you are. And as any story or novel goes, there's not one specific path, there's not one specific approach that you have to take to tell a compelling story. And so it is our hope that we can teach you and show you how to maximize and get every single thing you can out of every single part of your law school application story to help you tell the most compelling story possible. So that when you apply to law school, you can have an admissions officer say to you, I read your resume. I read your personal statement. I read one of your letters of recommendations, and I knew exactly why you wanted to go to law school. I could see you in my school. That is our hope for you. Before I go, I just want to say this. If nobody has told you yet, you belong here. I don't care what your GPA looks like. I don't care what character fitness issues you think you have. I don't care what your grandpa thinks, your ex-boyfriend thinks, okay, what Donald Trump, the internet trolls, I don't care what any of those people think. You belong here, okay? Don't let anybody else tell you anything else. You belong here. And it is my hope and it is my great privilege to be a part of this journey with you. Thanks for listening, guys.